All right, Vlogmas number 4, English paper piecing part 2. If you're joining me again today, welcome back. Happy Tuesday, everybody. We are indeed, as you can see, having a bit of a snowstorm today. And oh boy, is it good. I am sitting here looking out my window while I'm chatting with you, and everything is just covered in snow. And you can't really see very far in the distance because of the snow. And I think we're going to get a nice accumulation by the time this little system passes through. So I'm quite excited about that. All right, English paper piecing part 2. As you can see, I have all of my hexagons ready to go. I have laid them out in the design pattern that I would like to attach them to the center hexagon. I sort of played around with how I liked the placement of them, and then this is how I intend to sew them to the center. So we always start with the center, and you pick one other hexagon to start with, okay? I have removed all of the pins from the paper pieces. Those are now out. Everything is basted and ready to go. So you start with your center hexagon, and I usually just start with one of the ones to the right because I'm right-handed, and you fold them together right sides in. So the right side of the fabric is facing each other like that. And then you take the side of the hexagon where they would have been joined together when you were looking at your design, and that's where you're going to start to sew. Now I like to start to sew in the bottom corner, and I work my way this way. So as I sew, what you will be doing is sewing each hexagon, one side of the hexagon that surround the center of the flower, to the center. So by the time I'm done, I'm going to have 6 loose hexagons that are all attached to the center. So the center is going to be the only one that has all sides sewn to it. That's the first step, okay? So starting with my first one here, I do not have a knot in my thread. I don't like having knots in the sewing itself. So you start at the very bottom corner, and you're going to take a little bit of fabric from each hexagon. Can you see? It's barely any at all. It's like a little teeny little bite of each piece of fabric. Bring the needle through and leave about, oops, it doesn't work if you bring your thread all the way through. Leave about 1 inch of thread, because what you're going to do is you're just going to stitch over that as we go. So hold that end down with your thumb, come underneath that extra end, and you're going to take your next stitch fairly close to your first one. I tend to take the first few stitches very close together so as to really anchor that beginning down. There's my second stitch, and I'm holding the end with my other thumb so that now that end loose thread is anchored down. And I'm going to keep it there so that I will continue to sew over it a few more times to make sure that it is nice and secure. Very little bits of fabric being taken from both hexagon each time my needle passes through. And then you just simply whip stitch that side together. Being careful to take as little fabric from each as you can, but still have a secure. Can you see how much I've taken there? Not very much at all, but just enough to sew both sides together. Watch your tension. You don't want it to be too tight, but you want it to be secure. Now I'm using a white thread. Chances are pretty good that I'm going to see a little bit of it when I open this up, and I'll show you in a minute, because of the red fabric that I'm sewing through that is my center hexagon. But you know, depending on how picky you are about that, you can take fewer threads of each side of the fabric, and that will decrease your chances of having thread showing on the top. But I'm not overly fussy about it. I tend to like generally a little more rustic look to my projects, if that makes sense. I don't mind that they look like I made them, as long as they're neat and tidy. I'm usually fairly proud of my work, so I don't mind if I have a little bit of white thread showing on the top. So as you can see, that is one side. I'm caught here. Oh my God, there. And now I have a little knot. This is very frequent. If you have a knot, before you pull it any tighter, put your needle in the loop, the extra loop that's on the top. Just give it a gentle little tug, and that knot should just come right out before it becomes a problem. You do not want to have knots that are not resolved, because they can undo themselves later on, creating a weak spot, you know, in your sewing. So I'm almost at the top here. Normally, if I wasn't filming this, I would be a lot quicker, but it's probably best that this has slowed me down a little bit, and then hopefully I'm explaining it well enough to you. So you come right up to the corner, so you can see that. And that is all that we're going to do with those two hexagons at the moment. And when you open them up, you can see they're attached. And actually, I did a pretty good job. I can't really see any white thread on the top there. So I'm pretty pleased with that. And then all you do is you take your next one, put it in place where it belongs, and you repeat the process. You do not have to start a new thread. You keep going with the same needle and thread that you've already got attached, that's already here in the corner of your last hexagon, and you simply start attaching the next one. Easy peasy. And move my tea out of the way there. I foresee myself knocking it over. Again, I like to take a few extra stitches closer together when they're in the corner, so as to create a slightly stronger connection there, where there are there will be three joins together, 3 points. And all you do is you keep doing that all the way around the hexagon with all 6 of the flowers. So I am going to turn off the recording for a minute, and I'm going to quickly sew the rest of the hexagons on, and then I'll be right back to show you the next step. See you in a minute. Okay, I'm back. I've got all 6 of my hexagons attached to my center red hexagon, and they're all loose, as you can see, but they all have that one side attached all the way around. So lots of people do this differently. Some people start with one side and then sew the side seams as they go. I am a little funny about when I do this. I don't like to fold any of my paper templates in half. because I like to reuse them as long as I possibly can because, well, I make my own. And I don't want to have to remake them all the time. So I am, you know, frugal with my templates. So I do not fold them in half. So that's why I sew all 6 sides together at the same time. And then I'm still attached. My thread is still attached to the back from the very last hexagon that I attached to the center square. I'm just going to set my needle aside for a moment. And if you have a needle minder, it's probably the perfect time to use it. I don't have one handy, so I'm just going to leave it there and be careful with it. Then I am going to clip my basting threads on the very center hexagon. And I'm going to get rid of that thread. Just pull it out. And then I'm going to remove the paper template from that middle hexagon. Just pop it right out. Just comes right out. Ready to be reused. And as you can see on my back, that center hexagon is nicely stitched down, completely attached on all sides. And if you want a little close-up of my stitching, you can see the whip stitching there. Nice small stitches. Okay, so now we're ready to sew all of the side seams together. And so because we've gotten rid of that center piece of paper, we have a flexible flower that we can fold. So I'm going to, because my thread is here, that's the seam that I'm going to start with. So I'm simply going to fold those 2 sides together. My hexagon is now in half, and I'm going to follow the exact same steps that I followed before to sew this seam here together. Now, because we have another corner section here where we have those 3 points meeting together, I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I did before and take a couple of extra small tiny stitches just to make sure that there will be no holes on the front of my work when I open the flower back up again. And I'm just going to take those small little stitches all the way to the top. Now this is quite common where I will get caught up my thread on the other hexagons. So if you just try to keep yourself organized and keep those out of the way, you can move a little faster. Some people take bigger stitches on their side seams. Some people, like me, are maybe a little over the top, overkill with how many I put in. I want to know that it's secure. And especially if I'm making a quilt. I'm actually probably a little further apart with my whip stitching on this design than I would be if I were creating flowers for a quilt top, because I want to know for sure that those hexagons are not going to be coming apart, you know, when they're going through the washing machine and things like that. So I tend to keep my stitches very close together and probably do a third more stitches than is probably necessary. But, you know, we're here anyways, right? Might as well take the time. One thing I didn't mention before, when you are doing this seaming together, you most likely will want to be using a thimble on this finger right there. If depending on how you sew, maybe it's this finger. Whichever finger is pushing the needle is going to get quite sore. And over time, if you are as addicted to this craft as I am, and you can do it for hours and hours and hours, you will actually, that needle will go right through your skin after a time. until you build up a callus there. And that is one of the most painful things when you're just absolutely hooked on getting those hexagons sewn together, and all of a sudden the needle slips into that little crack in your skin. It will make you jump a mile. So I have a bit of a callus there at the moment, and I'm only doing one flower, so that's why I'm not wearing a thimble at the moment. But if I were in serious EPP mode and I was going to be making 10 or 20 flowers at a time, I would definitely be wearing a thimble to help protect that finger. It's very painful. Okay, so we've reached the top of that side seam there. Now what I do here, I don't want knots, but I do want to anchor that thread. So I will go back a couple of stitches over the whip stitches that I've already done. Two or three little teeny tiny stitches just to anchor it down. And then when you clip your thread, leave a tail. Don't clip it close to the hexagon. Leave a tail that you can pull. Okay, and then when we open it up, we can see that that side is now done. See? Just like that. And so now we have to do the same thing all the way around these other loose sides. Now, really, how you do that is up to you. You know, sew them together exactly how you want to do it. I tend to sort of get in a groove with the way that I'm going, and I tend to go around the same direction. So the next one that I will probably do is I'll probably start with this seam, okay? And I will start at the top and go down, because if I go to the bottom, I can carry my thread underneath very carefully within this. You know, you can take a few stitches in here to anchor your thread down. You don't want to have a long float of thread loose in the back, because that's kind of a recipe for those stitches to start to come loose over time. So you do want to anchor that thread within within this extra bit of fabric that's at the back there. But if you do that, you don't have to restart a needle. You can just anchor your thread in the extra fabric, sew your way over here gently. Make sure that you don't sew your way through the back through the front of your hexagon, and come over here, and then you can open this up, and then you can go from the bottom to the top of that seam, end your thread, and then you will have 3 sides done. And then you do the same thing over here. 1, 2, and 3. It doesn't really matter which one you do first or whichever way you do it. By the time you're done, all of those seams will be sewn together, and you'll have a beautiful, beautiful flower. Okay, so I'm going to leave you there today. If you're following along with all 3 parts of this English paper piecing series that I'm doing, part number 3 I will put out again next Tuesday. So then we will be turning this beautiful flower into a finished object. And what that finished object is still a mystery, both to you and to me, because I'm not quite sure yet. I still have a few ideas, but I'm not exactly sure. And I actually kind of like that. I like that it's sort of toying around in my mind, the different things that I'd like to do with it, because it's a very simple little shape. Lots of options. We could turn it into a bag. We could turn it into a pincushion. We could turn it into a Christmas tree ornament. We could applique it onto a large pillow for the couch and do, you know, a couple of these on the pillow design. There are a lot of different options here. So I'm not sure. We'll see. It will be something fairly simple though. Something that I can show you in a mini Vlogmas episode next week. So I am going to carry on, and I'm going to finish seaming all of these loose sides together so that my hexagon is complete. And then when I see you next week, we'll finish it into something. I will see you tomorrow for another little mini Vlogmas episode. Happy stitching, everybody.